Finally, in SEAL training, there's a bell. All you have to do to quit is ring the bell. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to wake up at 5 o'clock. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to do the runs, the obstacle course, the PT, and you no longer have to endure the hardships of training. If you want to change the world, don't ever, ever ring the bell.
You are listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour presented by Kill Clip Performance Drinks.
Enjoy drinking Kill Clip after sweaty workouts, big rides, full rounds, long days, longer nights, or whenever you feel the need to get back up to full speed.
Kill Clip Performance Drinks for Warriors. Ignite, endure, recover. And now, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into another edition of Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Clip. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is a former Navy SEAL who transitioned out of military life into public speaking, motivational speaking, and working with some of the most notable high-level companies in America, including professional sports teams. He was also part of the CIA. He has an extensive background, both military and civilian. Some of his clients, the Boston Red Sox, the Miami Dolphins, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and a whole lot more. He is David Rutherford here on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. David, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Bam, man. Mark, that's the way I love being introduced, bud. That fires me up, bro.
That's great. I love the energy right off the bat. You could tell that, Buds must have been an easy program for you with all the energy you got.
I don't know if it was easy,
okay.
Man. Anybody Mark would ever tell you Buds was easy as a lion sack, right?
Well, some of the SEALs have. Some of them go, well, the physical part wasn't that hard. It was just the mental stuff that you had to clear, and kind of that has become your specialty later on in life and currently what you're doing now. But let's go back to the beginning because, a lot of kids don't grow up with the idea of being a Navy SEAL. Were you one of those kids? Did you have something else in mind?
Hell no. I was going to be a Division I quarterback and win the Heisman Trophy and go on to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
So you had my dream, except for the Pittsburgh Steelers part.
Exactly. Probably, I bet it was actually verbatim. I bet we started at the same time, at the same year. We did the same trajectory. $100, it's almost identical.
Yeah, the only problem is I didn't have any talent. I don't know about you, so that kind of derailed all my dreams.
Let me put it this way. I'll get into it here in a second, but I had a professional arm, but I had the speed and the height of a lacrosse player. Gotcha. So that was the difference.
So you start out playing football. I mean, was this always the trajectory you wanted to be on?
Oh heck yeah, man! My mom. She is a two-time state champion tennis player from Michigan growing up. I mean, comprehensive athletic mindset, driven to succeed in everything she does. She's just this incredible role model and influence starting early. So, I had a ball in my hand, in the crib, so to speak. And by 4 years old is when I, picked up, started playing on my first organized flag football team. And by 10 years old, I quarterback was the deal. And I was the kid that was, went all the way in. I'd go to 2 or 3 quarterback clinics a summer. I would throw 500 footballs a day. I mean, I watched film. I mean, I was nuts. That was my life, was football.
What was it about the position of quarterback that you liked? Was it just, for lack of a better term, the center of attention, the idea that you had everything in control, or was it the leadership aspect? What was it?
I think it was probably a little bit of everything. For me, though, it was the foundation of motivation on the team, right? It was the guy that, everybody was looking to ignite the play, to keep the momentum rolling. So I always gravitated towards the person that was going to lift people up. When we were getting shellacked or I was on a horrible team, I could always bring guys back in the fold. Hell, my senior year down in Boca Raton, Florida, where I went to high school at St. Andrews, we were 0-10. And we were one of the worst teams in our school's history. And it was one of those things that I wasn't going to quit. Nobody on the team quit. Most of the guys were sophomores and freshmen. We had graduated a huge class of seniors the year before. There were only 5 seniors. And that aspect of it, in terms of, hey, let's stay in the fight together, was really the dominant factor in my trajectory and why I loved the position so much.
All right, so you get through high school. You just mentioned your senior year. Are colleges coming knocking on your door for scholarships? I mean, that's the next step for you, right?
Heck no, they weren't. I mean, 0-10, you're not getting anything. Luckily, I was the Florida representative for the National High School All-Star lacrosse game, and we were state champions in Florida. Although the size and scope of Florida lacrosse back in 1990 was, de minimis comparatively to any of the other major areas, but it was enough to okay, there's something going on here. He's got some skill. But I didn't want to give up the dream. So I looked into doing a postgraduate year and ended up doing a postgraduate year at Choate up in Connecticut.
Okay, so what's going on in this postgraduate year? I mean, obviously there's no school involved, right?
No, there is. No,
okay.
Full academic. Choate's one of the probably in the top 5 preparatory schools in the country. And for me, we had heard about this through my high school lacrosse coach, one of the greatest lacrosse coaches in the country. His name's Gary Niels. He was the former MVP of the Maryland Terps 1977 national championship lacrosse team. He was the goalie, and he had really become a significant mentor in my life. And he said, "Well, Dave, if you don't want to give up on football, try postgraduate year." So I looked at about 5 or 6 schools out there, and ended up choosing Choate because this guy who was our coach he told me right off that, he goes, "We're going to throw the ball 40 times a game. I want to air it out with your arm. This is what we're going to do." And I'm like, done. So I show up in August and preseason, and there's a guy next to me who ends up being the strongest, fastest guy. And his name's Mike Gerber. And he was from Germantown Academy in the Philly area. And he was also a quarterback. So we ended up having in one of the most challenging emotional times in my life athletically, I was forced to split time and not quit, go to another school and share time with Mike. And we worked it out. Now he was an option quarterback. So it became a wonderful tactical advantage for Coach Erzik. And we went on to win, the New England Big Prep School Championship that year. I mean, we averaged beating teams by 35 points, I think it was, and really just dominated the league. So that turned out to be a great experience. However, again, my statistics didn't work. I got a lot of D3 offers, one AA, but no D1 offers whatsoever. But I did get recruited to play lacrosse at Penn State University. So my idea, show up at Penn State and walk on with old Joe Paterno.
Wow. Okay.
That was the idea.
All right. Well, he is David Rutherford, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. David, a Navy SEAL, now motivational speaker, has a company called Frog Logic. We'll get to all that coming up. But okay, so you get to Happy Valley. You're supposed to play lacrosse, but football comes first because lacrosse is in the spring. So what happens?
We were in freshman study hall, and my roommate, who was an All-American from Baltimore named Mike O'Keefe, went on to become captain of the team, really, really brilliant player. And he's like, "Hey, man, tryouts this weekend. I think you need to go, tell the freshman quarterback you're going to take his job." And, me growing up in South Florida and where there's a lot of trash talking, that's part of the game. It was the heyday of the U and what was going on out there in Miami.
Sure, yeah.
And so I was like, "Yeah, where is he?" He goes, "They're sitting he's sitting in the front row of you." And in the front seat of our class was this behemoth of a human being. And it turned out to be Kerry Collins.
Oh, yeah.
So my, 13, 14-year dream of playing Division I football was now confronted by the number 1 recruited quarterback in the country, who went on to be one of the best quarterbacks in Penn State's history, 16 seasons in the NFL and 2 Super Bowl appearances. I mean, my God, the man had a 80-yard ball on a 3-step drop. I mean, it was insane. He was 6'5", 255 pounds. So because of that, the ominous nature of that challenge, and also my own narcissistic mentality at that age, I quit. I quit on the dream.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I did. I didn't even try out, not even to just hold extra points to be water boy on that great team that was. You know, there was Kijana Carter, Bobby Ingram. I mean, it was, you know, one of the most prolific football teams in all of collegiate sports history. And I quit, man, and gave up the dream and suffered dearly because of it.
I was so not expecting you to say that. Like I was expecting you to look Harry Collins in the eye and tell him you were going to lose his job or he was going to lose his job to you, and was curious to see how the story went. So what did you say to your roommate after you told him that you weren't going to try out?
He knew that something was going on rapidly. I mean, my entire mentality shifted. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just take this year. I'm gonna get used to the school. You know, all the excuses that begin to come out, and everybody when they're in that space of a major catalytic shift in their purpose or dream or focus. The number one thing we do to, you know, kind of compartmentalize our fear or protect our you know, that depression, if you will, of giving up, we come up with excuses. So it was everything from, I'm going to just get used to Penn State. I'm going to get bigger. I'm going to grow. I'm going to prepare myself and I'll try out next year. Right. And so that was the easy, I absolutely took the easy way out. But what I didn't expect and what I wasn't prepared for, because I just hadn't been exposed to it enough in my life, was the repercussions of you know, that psychosis of what happens to you mentally when you do quit on something really big in your life. And as a result, I pretty much jumped into a bottle of Jack Daniels, kind of abused drugs, and ended up didn't take long before I was ineligible and ultimately kicked off the team by my junior year.
The lacrosse team.
The lacrosse team, yes. And ended up really battling depression and, you know, was suicidal on a couple of different occasions.
And this is all for a college-age kid. That seems to be a lot. Like, you know, usually I get it, the psychosis of that when you're later in life. Like when you're in your 20s
Right.
and your 30s and you've had some experience and you realize loss and you have a better comprehension of how precious life is and all those things. But as an 18, 19-year-old kid, none of those thoughts really enter your consciousness all that often. How did you make this such an emotional event for you?
I'm one of the great blessings I have, I think, and also curses that, you know, I've always been exposed to kind of deep metaphysical, theoretical thought and you know, to contemplate the higher meaning of life through my father. My father's an attorney, a real brilliant man, a real deep thinker, if you will. And, you know, it was in that time where, you know, I got there. I had invested so much of myself in chasing the dream that I had negated to allow the truth, just the physiological truth of the fact that my ball release point was at about 6'2.5", right, at major velocity. And with an average size of a line that's 6'8", 6'9", and 300 pounds, you know, I'm finding lanes that don't even exist. And if they do, they're moving so rapidly because all the linemen are running faster 40s than I am. So I didn't even acknowledge that possibility. And partly because, you know, grow up in the environment I did with a wonderful influence of a mom telling me that I can do anything in my life. And I'm not blaming her whatsoever. But I negated any of the truths that are affiliated with performance at the highest level physically, right? I didn't want to believe the fact that I was a 5'11", 165 pound, 40-yard dash and 4'9". I didn't want to believe that was the truth. And so I was ill prepared for the backlash or repercussions for that. And I think partly the way it enhanced me was because I think I did have that real substantial forethought of long-term purpose and the profound nature of what that means and evolving as a human being, just because I'd had so many of those talks with my dad.
Well, you know what your problem was, David, is you were born 10 years too early. Drew Brees hadn't made it to the NFL yet, so no one was looking at guys your height. You know, that was our biggest problem. If we had come along 10 years later, we might have had a puncher's chance. So,
you know what, Mark? You and I are going to roll with that till the day we die.
Exactly. It wasn't our fault. It was we just hadn't been created yet in the NFL's eyes.
Exactly.
All right. Well, so you're out of school, or you're kicked off the team. Do you get kicked out of school? Do you finish school? What happens?
I ended up scratching and pawing. In the regular year, I averaged like a 1.2, 1.3, but on summers I had a 4.0. I was, granted, it's probably because I was a Florida kid, right? My prefrontal cortex only functioned when it was 70 degrees or warmer, I guess, and so I was able to kind of cobble together reason enough for the university to keep me in. But by my senior year, I had isolated myself. I was living by myself. I was on double secret academic probation. I was on the way out, and I was really in the throes of depression. And so it was.
Did you tell your parents about any of this? Did they know?
Yeah, they were petrified. They were really scared. And, they would come up frequently. They'd have me drive down as much as possible. But my dad had experienced something similar when he was at the University of Michigan back in the day. And he was expelled for, I think, as he puts it, the only person in U of M's history to be expelled for academic drifting. And so they kicked him out. He went home. He went to a smaller college where he's from near Detroit, got 4.3 and was able to re-enter and graduate Michigan. So I think he was hoping that somewhere in that process, I would find myself again and reignite a desire to want to finish academically. Because at that point, I actually had discovered I had a brain. And so although I wasn't doing anything in school, I was an art major with a minor in poetry. So I was basically a deadbeat, hippie, if you will. But I was reading, incredible works from everybody you can imagine, from Descartes to Camus. I read, everything I could find about, philosophy and humanities, sociology, I don't even know how many psychology courses and sociology courses I took, right? And I began to come to understand that, hey, suffering is a massive component of the human condition.
Yes.
And that was, I think, really kicked off for me in the most bizarre of circumstances. My freshman year, in fall semester, my next door neighbor was this wonderful guy from Scranton, PA, Tony Gransky. And Tony was in the Army Reserves, which I know you're part of that great organization as well yourself. And he came over and he's like, David, or they called me Elvis back then. He's like, Elvis, read this book. I think you'll like it. And it was a book about Navy SEALs in Vietnam. And I knew about Green Berets. I knew about Rangers. One of my favorite movies by the time I was 13, 14 years old was Apocalypse Now. And just, I was also a big Joseph Conrad fan and Hearts of Darkness. And so I loved the stories and how it played out cinematically. And so I read this book and I was like, my God, these guys are incredible. All right. Now press pause, fast forward. It's April 1995. I wake up one morning. I didn't, have a glass of Jack. I didn't hit a bong hit. I hadn't cleaned my clothes in a month. I said, you know what? I'm going to go to the laundromat. So I go to the laundromat down the road off campus, stick my clothes in. And I'd always brought a journal or a sketch pad to kind of get rid of whatever I was feeling and get it out. I'd learned that was a great exercise to do. And this time I was empty. There was nothing left in me. And so as I was sitting, watching my stuff go round and round, I had really my first big God moment in my life. And to say, hey, it's time to change my life. It's time to recapture the things that enable you to embrace fear, the stuff that drives your self-confidence to discover greater purpose. And all of that had always happened when I was a part of a team.
Right.
So within the this illumination of this epiphany, the first thing that came to my consciousness was the SEAL teams. And that was a place that I was going to be able to go and get invested in, and then be able to reinstate, if you will, that never quit mindset or mentality.
He is David Rutherford, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. When we come back, David's journey into the Navy and into Buds becoming a Navy SEAL. That's all coming up here on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour, presented by Kill Cliff Performance Drinks.
Kill Cliff, performance drinks for warriors to get you up, get you through, and get you back to full speed.
And now, back to the show with host Mark Zinno.
Welcome back to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest, David Rutherford, former Navy SEAL, former member of the CIA, now owner of a company called Frog Logic. He is currently a motivational speaker and works with companies, professional sports teams, Fortune 500 companies all across the country, making them better. And we last left off, David decided to change his life by joining the Navy SEALs. Now, it's interesting because you told me how much you realized physically the challenges for you, to become a professional football player. It was over daunting. Like it was what led you to quit. Did you know physically what the Navy SEALs were about and what you were about to get into?
Had no effing idea whatsoever.
Probably better that way.
Yeah, it was incredible. I'm glad they didn't. I mean, we had a few things out there, right? You could watch Navy SEALs, the movie. There had been, I don't think, what's her name? Paula Zahn had, she did her, the first exposure into Buds was in class 206 when I was there, but there was nothing, Mark, really nothing about the complexities, what you would experience, recovery requirements, preparation. I mean, Stu Smith was, I think he was putting some stuff out by then, but I was just like, hey, I'm a Division I athlete. I'm good to go. I'm going to crush this. This is going to be easy, right? Nope.
Yeah, little did you know. Okay, but let me ask you, you have a college degree, right? So do you just go enlist in the Navy?
Nope, I did. I dropped out my fourth year. I left with 170 credits. I think all tallied, probably 95 actually mattered toward any specific degree. I was the guy that switched minors and majors every semester.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. So you had to enlist then at that point in time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so did you enlist with a Navy SEAL contract, or is that something you had to fight your way to get?
No, it was a different process back then, way different. I drove home, spent 2 weeks with my father, talking him into explaining in a logical way, why this was going to change my life, how it was going to benefit me. We have 15 lawyers in my family. It's academics is everything for us. And so when he finally agreed and understood the deeper need for me to confront some greater demons in my life and to be a part of something bigger than myself, he agreed. So I went in, and at the time they were significantly undermanned with medics or corpsmen. And so they had created this program called the Dive Fair program. And if you joined up under the Dive Fair pretext, you could go straight to Buds, no A school, no learning a job in the Navy, go straight to Buds. And if you graduated, you'd get an $1,800 bonus, woohoo, right? And you'd go straight to 18 Delta in Fort Bragg and bypass any Navy A schools. So I was like, done, sign me up right then and there. And within a few weeks, end of June of 95, I showed up at MEPS and got on the bus and went to A school, boot camp up in Great Lakes.
All right. And so how physically challenging was that for you?
It was easy. It was ridiculous. It was, make your bed, march in line. There's a couple things where they give you a beat down in your barracks, and it was nothing. I mean, it was, and we all knew that. I mean, we understood it. It was just part of the thing. But where my first dose came was after I got out of boot camp, 8 weeks, and I had performed real well. I became the head of my boot camp class and state flags and all that stuff and whatever, and was riding this high. And then we go to these dive motivators at the pool at the base there, which there were 2 SEALs, and God, baby sweet Jesus, did I get an indoc. And our first day in showing up, I think there was 13 or 12 or 13 of us that were waiting to orders to go to Bethesda, Maryland, then to go to Buds. They had us in the push-up position for 2.5 hours in our dress whites right when we walked in the door.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to a SEAL, direct SEAL contact, if you will. And from there on, it has never gotten easier.
The old Navy SEAL adage, right, David? The only easy day was yesterday. All right.
Amen.
So you get to Buds, right? And
right.
I mean, this is a whole different world, obviously. Take me through your first 24, 48 hours and even Hell Week as it stands.
First 2 hours, I checked on board with a young kid who had come from Connecticut. It was a brilliant swimmer. And when we transferred to, the 13 of us went to Bethesda, Maryland, we would all work out, we'd do whatever. I ended up, kind of being like, I'm in great shape. I'm good. I'm going to be all right. Little did I know. So we show up, we don't even check on board. And we got a beating on the quarterdeck from the on-duty chief on the Sunday night we showed up.
Describe a beating. What do you mean a beating?
Back, belly, feet, flutter kicks, ready, begin,
push-ups. You mean, okay. So just for people who are listening, not like a physical beat, not like they didn't physically hit you. It was just a physical fitness test. Okay, gotcha.
It was a beat down for us is when an instructor targets you, your swim buddy, your boat crew, your class, and they proceed to adjust your attitude through the physical and mental application of positive pain.
There you go. That's very well and delicately stated, I might add.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
You get through this, and what are you thinking at this point in time?
Within several weeks, within 2 weeks, within 2 days there, I was like, my God, how is this possible for a human being to endure this? Unfortunately for me, I had not done any real preparation running in boots or on soft sand. And it puts incredible stress on your ITB band. And within, like I said, 2-3 weeks, my ITBs on both knees flared they were swollen so dramatically, I couldn't bend my knees. And as a result, I had to go to Bud's Medical. Because I was the rah-rah guy, I was the hoo-yah guy always. I was always the guy with the great attitude and the positive and pulling guys that were struggling and all that, helping everybody around me. I was given a role from 205, class 205 to 206. So in that time, I had a 2-month stretch to wait for the next class to show up, check in and class up and get going. And so in that time, I was like, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again. So every day after work, I would run additional training runs in the soft sand with my boots. Sometimes 5 miles, sometimes 10, just to get my legs in shape for the run. So we start 206, we class up week 1, day 1. I'm a road guard. That means if you're a road guard, you get extra time in the chow hall to eat, which I had found made a huge impact in digestion, in particular when you go to pool. Because there's nothing worse than woofing be in the back of the line, back of the class, you show up, you've got to eat your food in the line, get back out in class, run to the pool, and then you're getting crushed in the pool and you're puking every time you go to the pool. It's not good for your long-term endurance of the day, right? So at least I understood that. So I was road guard. Well, as road guard, you run additionally as well too. By Friday of week 1, woke up, I had just excruciating pain in my feet and in my legs. I managed to make it through most of the day. And then finally I was like, I got to go to medical. So I went to medical and basically sent me over, took x-rays, and I had stress fractures in both tib fibs.
Wow.
So now shattered, as you can imagine. And I went over there. The doc recommended dropping me, medical drop, because I just couldn't do it. My body wasn't prepared. I go over, I see the base training officer. I'm standing tall at attention. You know, he's like, Rutherford, what the hell is going on? I go, sir. He goes, hey, first off, you need to relax and tell me your story, because this is probably your last shot at whether or not your dream of being a SEAL is going to be shattered or not. So I was like, sir, I don't have any idea what's going on. I told him the story leading up. I told him I was a Division I athlete. I'd never had leg problems in my life. You know, I played 4 sports a year since I was 4. I don't understand it. So he's like, all right, wait here. So he goes over to PTRR office, which is the pre-phase office, which is the first month you're there, you go through pre-phase. And he talks to somebody, and he comes back in a little bit, and he says, well, Rutherford, you must have a Bud's Angel on your shoulder. I'm going to give you, I'm going to make your world come true. I'm going to give you, do you want a single roll or a double roll? And the man literally granted me a reprieve from, you know, what potentially I believe could have been catastrophic for me emotionally, mentally, physically, by giving me a second chance in Buds. So I took a double roll to class 208, and for the next 4 months, conditioned myself every day after getting a beat down during the day in preparation for 208.
So when you say a double roll, then they're going to move you forward 2 classes, not 1, right?
2 classes, yes.
Okay.
I skipped class 207 and went to 208.
And so they allowed you to stay there and train and get ready and everything else, right?
Yep. I became the pre-phase off instructor's do boy, if you will. I became the master check-in specialist. I did anything and everything I could to show the gratitude for them doing something that they never did. And what I ultimately found out later was that it was a Chief Warrant Officer Reworks, this guy who is a legend in the SEAL community. He's an original plank owner from SEAL Team 6. Demo Dick hand-picked him. He was the man who said, if Rutherford can get healthy, he's the most motivated guy in the class. He's a total team player. If he can stay healthy, he'll make a good frogman. And so I owe really the majority of my career to that man. There's been other guys who've played a significant role, but Warrant Officer Reworks was really, the catalyst in the beginning.
He's David Rutherford, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. So you get to go to class 208. Kind of just give me the edited version of how long that takes, and eventually from the moment you get your Trident.
At 208, Hell Week, get through, had an incredible Hell Week class. In my boat crew was the Admiral's son, Adam Smith, amazing human being. I had a guy, Jeff Holland, who went on to be just a superstar, next level performer in the SEAL teams. Rob O'Neill was in my boat crew, another incredible operator. And I was surrounded by amazing human beings that really enabled me to make it. They were the cast. These were the hardest human beings, the most incredible men I'd ever seen. I get to die phase. Guess what? I failed pool comp.
What?
Failed pool comp and get rolled back to 209. Now pool comp is Hell Week in the water, so you're basically getting drowned. So once again, for my troubles of not doing it the first time, for 2 months straight, waiting for 209, almost every day we'd go to the combat training tank, and I had to practice pool comp. So by 209, when I went and joined them in second phase, you better believe I passed on that first time. And then I ended up finishing with class 209. So 15 months for the long-haired, hippie, burnout, dropout college kid.
Let me ask you, David. I ask this of all the SEALs because I'm always curious to their reaction. And I, to explain to people who may be joining us for the first time, there's a bell that anybody can go ring for a drop-on request, DOR. So they just say, hey, I quit. I've had enough. Physically can't take it anymore. This isn't for me. I'm ready to go home. When you hear that bell ring, what did it mean to you? Was it a motivator? Was it like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy dropped? I mean, what was your reaction to that?
I lived in the state of duality, right? I really tried to become close. I realized early on it was about the men that were around you that were going to enable you to make it. And so I developed very close relationships with guys. And when friends would quit, it really hurt, right? I didn't want to see them go. And I knew it would be one of those catastrophic decisions in their lives that would take a long time to recover from. But in the same state, I also felt, wow, because I thought about quitting a lot. A lot of guys I know say, no, not really. I knew I didn't. Man, I thought about it all the time. When you're in complete and utter misery and you're freezing and your body aches and you're getting screamed at and you think an instructor is going to just their sole purpose in life is to break you, and everybody breaks, right? That type of fear drives thought. I don't care. I believe everybody towards saying, well, man, if I just end it now, this will end and I can go on and do whatever else in my life that will give me some self-actualization. So the bell really, it is the weighted difference. I mean, General McChrystal, the blip that you guys have at the beginning, man, it's everything. That bell is really if there's anything other than the trident on your chest, which is a driving factor, it's that bell is the most motivating thing in sound you could ever hear.
So after all this, after being rolled back 2 and 3 times and what you had to endure, you get that trident finally. What were you thinking? What were you feeling?
Well, my process to the Trident was, again, another very challenging aspect of my career. I ended up graduating BUD/S. I went to Team 5 for several months, waiting for my jump school and 18 Delta class. So I didn't get my Trident. So I was a new guy at a team for several months without a Trident, just getting hammered, doing menial labor, cleaning the latrines. I mean, it was challenging. Then I went to jump school for a month. Then I went to 18 Delta I ended up being there 8 months because I failed the cardiac portion of my national paramedic test that we had to take in order to graduate, and had to stay 2 additional months there. Then when I went to my Team 1, you have to take these. Back then you had to take a PQS board. And so I had to wait 3 months before my STT class started, cleaning the latrines and picking up cigarette butts and whatever at the team, went through STT. Then finally I got back to 1, took my PQS, and they put me on probation at Team 1 for an extended period. And although I crushed all my PQS, my goat locker board, which is my chief's board, they made the determination that I needed to wait some extra time in order to receive my Trident. The pipeline is much different, and a lot of that is because of certain circumstances and stuff like what I went through. But for me, I think it was the beneficial thing because it made me appreciate my Trident when I finally did get it in my, a couple months into my first platoon. My chief, Wally Graves, who was one of the most profound influences in my life, finally went in and said, hey, he's ready, give him his Trident.
So from start to finish, how long does it take you to become a SEAL and get your Trident?
Oh, for me, it was, from BUD/S to the beginning of BUD/S, that was November 95. I got my Trident in February of 99.
Okay. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, look, let's take a break because there's a lot more to get to here. And when we come back, we'll go through your time as a SEAL and how you transition into the incredible career that you have now. He's David Rutherford, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. Don't go anywhere, Mark Zinno. Don't go anywhere.
You are listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour presented by Killcliff Performance Strengths, proud partner of the Navy SEAL Foundation.
Welcome back to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is David Rutherford, former Navy SEAL, former member of the CIA, now owns a company called Frog Logic that excels in expertise of motivation, motivational speaking, working with Fortune 500 companies, and improving everything that they do. And we last left off with David as he finishes his time going through his Navy SEAL training to get his Trident. It's the end of 1999, and 9/11 is around the corner. So kind of take me through the events leading up to that and what you were doing, because that's obviously going to be a career-changing moment.
Absolutely. I after my first platoon, which was a great platoon at Team 1, the needs of the Navy called, and I became an instructor at SEAL qualification training. Although I was a one platoon wonder, really had some challenges adjusting to that but I had some profound influences. Another group of amazing human beings, took me under their wing, taught me how to be a great instructor. And that's really where my passion for teaching was ignited. 9/11 happens, and an opportunity presented to join a SEAL Team 1 mobility platoon that was deploying to Afghanistan in a short period of time. So I competed against 13 other people within the Naval Special Warfare Center for a billet as the medic on this team to go overseas. And because of the faith that my two bosses, Mike Liu and Bruce Cunningham, had in me, they went to our command master chief, and then the command master chief took it on to our commander and said, this is the guy you want overseas. And so in February or March of 2002, I was able to deploy with SEAL Team 1 to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which ultimately was it's profound. The impact that any experience like that has on a human being is profound, to say the least.
Now, you actually end up getting out of the Navy shortly thereafter in 2003, or, a year later, a little more than a year later. So what was the impetus for that decision? Because you had worked so hard to get to this point.
I did. And there was an aspect of that I discovered downrange where, we didn't have a prolific experience like many of the incredible platoons that came just a little bit later, the Fallujah guys, the Ramadi guys, the heyday of certain areas in Afghanistan, 2010, 11. We didn't have a deployment like that. In fact, what happened was politics, the geostrategic nature of bigger politics, began to play a role in our operational tempo. And really, I became very disgruntled with how that worked. Here we were, not even a year after 9/11, and we knew where the enemy was. We knew what was going on, but yet powers bigger than us determined that we weren't allowed to take the fight to them, or perhaps it was we just didn't understand how to bring the fight to them, and that early on in the engagement. So that experience really was disheartening to me. And so when I came home, my dream was to eventually screen and go over to Dam Neck, and that just didn't work out for me. There was some needs of the Navy, and my career trajectory and the detailer, had put some grand hurdles in me. And so basically I said, you know what? I didn't think Iraq was going to be what it was. I had no idea. Last one was 100 days, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, and I felt from the experience I'd had in Afghanistan that Afghanistan was going to wind down. So I was like, you know what? I'm again a narcissistic, arrogant, impetuous young kid that had grown frustrated with the bureaucracy and the hierarchy of how it works in the big picture. I wasn't prepared emotionally for all of that, and so I made a really poor decision to get out, which ultimately it haunted me for years and years and years afterwards. But I punched out at 31 years old and moved home.
So in doing so, do you have a plan for the next phase of your life yet?
Yeah, I was going to sell real estate and make $1 gazillion.
Oh, okay.
My mom's a real successful realtor. So I come home, I get my real estate license, and within, 30 to 60 days, I realized I suck at selling real estate.
How'd you realize that?
Because when my mom and we partnered up, when the first call that my mom got, we're in South Florida, people aren't exactly the kindest human beings down here. They're calling my mom on Sunday night dinner, and they're screaming at her because nobody came to their open house. And I'm like, give me the phone, we made the determination that this was not a good career path where I was in the current, mental state. So I went from there. I sold camera systems to big strip malls. I worked with a big domestic security company out of Michigan, business development for them, and it all fell apart. And I moved rapidly back into those states of depression. Now, luckily, and very destructive behavior as well. Now, luckily, at that time, a friend of mine from training in my first platoon reached out and gave me a call. I was like, "Rut, bro, I need you. Maritime interdiction program, me, overseas, complete autonomy, 6 figures. Are you in or you out?" And at that moment, my engagement was disseminating, was breaking down. My friendships, I was a mess. I was acting like an idiot. And so I said, I'm in. So 8 days later, I was in the country of Azerbaijan working for Blackwater.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a paradigm shift.
Massive. But it was the thing that ultimately saved my life, for sure.
How so?
Because the camaraderie, by stripping myself, making the horrible decision to leave the teams in a time I wasn't emotionally or mentally prepared to be on my own, be able to have that back literally saved my life, and gave me that greater sense of purpose again, to be a part of that team. And so ended up spending the next 2 years working for them as an international training specialist, curriculum development. I was responsible for several building projects in Afghanistan, and really kind of began to thrive again and saw a higher purpose. And it was in that trip to Afghanistan where I had my second big God moment in my life. I was mentoring the counter-drug commandos, and we had done a hit up in the northern Afghanistan. And during the hit, nothing really happened. It was kind of false intelligence. And I'm sitting there, and I noticed the compound filled with kids, as they traditionally are. And it was in that moment that I really, for the first time, downrange, felt empathy for the children of Afghanistan, because they have nothing. They're at the bottom of the bottom, right? 13-year-old Afghan girls are basically receptacles for procreation. Afghan boys are sexual toys, beaten on a regular basis. There's no school, there's no hope, there's no nothing. And so that hit me for the first time. And that's where I made the decision to change my overall purpose, my overall mission in life. And that's when Frog Logic was born. And 6 months later, I wrote my first book, which was a kid's book, and started Frog Logic.
Amazing stuff. David Rutherford is our guest here on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. So where does, after Blackwater, from a career standpoint, how do you end up with the CIA, and how does that work out?
Well, I went heart and soul into Frog Logic, with the support of my parents. They got behind me. Within 2 years, I had spoken to almost 7,000 kids in North America. But schools don't pay real well. They don't have any money. So a lot of this stuff I was doing for free just to master my craft. Then I start getting some corporate gigs locally. I'm like, oh, wow, this might work. Then the economy collapses, right? And unless you're Tony Robbins, you ain't making money as a speaker or a trainer or anything. Thankfully, another friend from Blackwater at this time, who was working as a contractor for the agency, calls me up and says, hey, do you want to come and teach case officers how to integrate better with special operations units down the range? And I said, I'm in. And so in 2008, I started as an instructor for case officers, and very rapidly began to come to love and appreciate the magnitude of their intelligence, their focus, how they work, and really became passionate about human psychology through the genius of these case officers that I was able to work with. So after 2 years of doing that, I finally had realized, hey, it had been a long time since I had been downrange. I felt, a lot had happened in the war on terror. I felt like I needed to put my money with. Plus, I was carrying a boatload of shame from leaving my teammates. And, by then we had lost a bunch of people. So I said I rogered up and went back to work as a close protection specialist within the agency. And then spent the next 2 years doing that, all the while really developing the core philosophies of Frog Logic. And in my first and second deployment, my first deployment as a close protection specialist, I started writing my first book for adults.
It's kind of crazy that you had more deployments out of the SEALs than you did in.
Right? I mean, I had my first deployment, which was, pre-war, which was basically doing fit and partying. And so, yeah, it was amazing and just an incredible difference of understanding, because when when you're in the teams, it's such a compartmentalized, it's so isolated in our mindset, and it's so pure in every form, and it's such a beautiful thing to watch a finely tuned, SEAL platoon operate. But now I'm, working for Blackwater. It's a hodgepodge. Working for the agency was much more focused. I worked with some profound, incredible human beings at what they were, but they were Green Berets, and they were Rangers, and they were MARSOC guys. And it was this collective of influence that really was different. And the mission was very different as well, too.
So what's it like when a first professional sports team or Fortune 500 company comes to you and says, David, we want your help?
It's a long process. I always am leery because a lot of teams, when I first started, I used to think that, hey, you can literally take the SEAL playbook and drop it in with any sports team, any organization, any small unit or group or whatever, and apply the same exact things to their industry, and you're going to produce the elite. And the fact of the matter is that just doesn't work, right? You cannot put a rubber boat filled with ice water in the middle of your conference room, and anytime somebody talks back to a manager, there's a dispute, you just say, go hit the boat. You'll have a world-class lawsuit on your butt in 5 seconds. So it took me a long time to come to understand the nuances within the corporate world or the nuances in an individual team. And so as I work with teams, my job is to enhance their existing culture, to help them realign certain philosophical ideas. And then really from a personal level, my specialty is to invigorate the individual in a core motivational component, both all three: physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, in ways that make them better teammates. That's what I do.
Well, that's like when you put all that together, that can cover a broad range of companies, as you said. It's pretty amazing that Frog Logic has become something that literally can be used for anything.
And that was the intention. It was really not about to have this 50-step process of making $1 million in 30 days or teaching people how to have 6-minute abs. The reality is my doctorate is in pain. My doctorate is in emotional distress. My doctorate is in, being able to manage the truth of the human condition in such a way that you can be an active, productive, positive member of your core tribe and your organization you're with. And so and the intention was from 8 to 80 was really my belief structure is what people are available to. Now it's morphed and really, dependent upon certain groups I've worked with, working with the Boston Red Sox has been a wonderfully unique opportunity. I also worked, this year with the Oregon State Beavers, who won the Collegiate World Series. And my approach for each of those teams was radically different, right? Different age groups, different mentality, different core cultures, different external influences, the pressure of being on one of the biggest sports teams in the world with the magnitude of economic influence versus, this expectation, a really kind of, I think, a leadership development thing that was needed at Oregon State. So it becomes, and just yesterday, I spent all day with the United States Tennis Association, which I'm developing a relationship now to help build a kind of a Frog Logic program for them to help their players discover a greater capacity to manage and deal with emotional, physical, and mental pain.
That's amazing stuff. Unreal. Again, the company is called Frog Logic. David, what can we say? It's an incredible journey. And what's more remarkable is that it almost seems to be highlighted by a lot of things that are, failure is not the right word, but, you've had a lot of downs that you've able to get back up from and continue this journey. So from that standpoint, it's certainly awe-inspiring to watch because literally even though you've quit at times, you've found a way to get yourself back to the top.
The fact of the matter is we all quit. It's a reality. This concept of never quit is and it's right in your title of your incredible podcast. I mean, Todd represents the whole mentality of it. I mean, to kill the quit that comes out, because we all do, whether we quit minimally every day and not waking up on time and doing our workouts, or we quit on the big dreams. The beauty of who we become is what we do next. And then do we re-engage and get back into the combat of life? I mean, on our podcast that I do with Marcus Luttrell, Team Never Quit, right? We have people from all walks of life, much like you do, come on and share their story, their greatest never quit story. And, whether it's Diana Nyad, who took 30 plus years to swim from Cuba to Florida, or it's Lance Armstrong living in this perpetual state of defense of his, how he quit morally on people. The reality is we all quit. The great probability, which makes life worth living, is what we do next. What we do. What skill sets do we have to get back into the combat of life in support of the people we love most?
It's an amazing journey, incredible words to finish it up. But what can we say other than thank you, David Rutherford, for being part of Kill the Quit? We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And thanks, Todd, and everybody, John, everybody. Please keep doing what you're doing. The most important thing that I think everybody needs to understand is the power that you guys bring to the table for the Navy SEAL Foundation, the magnitude of money raised, and simply the amount of active duty and veterans helped as a result of your company's incredible effort. So I thank you for that.
This has been another edition of Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. We'll see you next week.
WFOM and W292 EV Marietta,
a Dickey broadcasting station.
Live from the Wellstar Health System Studios.
1230 and 106.3 FM, The Sports X.